All right, so as we move through the day, the next panel that comes up, next two panels that come up, I think really tackle some interesting points. They are going to try to explore, probe deep, almost do an expose on one of the biggest issues in the price of creative storytelling, the price of persuasion, which is ad tech tax. And I love the angle, which is what is the reality of the ad tech tax? And the panel after that, right after the break, is going to be moderated by Randy Rothenberg, which will talk about the supply chain from hell, the responsibilities that we have to deal with this, all right? The issue is that we frequently hear and talk about these aspects of the industry as though we're not in control of them or not fully aware. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we know for certain are happening. Nothing is certain except death and taxes, right? And we frequently hear the cost of automation described as a tax or a toll on the media industry, all right? And listen, the word tax is a troublesome word because all of us did that sociology and history class, and we remember taxation without representation is tyranny. Nicely done. Not surprised that Rajiv got that. Taxation without representation is tyranny defined. This was a slogan of the Revolutionary War. Years leading up to Revolutionary War, it is what generated the energy around that. The colonists were not allowed to actually control their destiny. They were paying a tax that they didn't think had anything to do with the living experiences they had here in the United States. For these reasons, though, the association of the word taxes, or the association of the word tax when referring to the technology costs involved in doing exactly what this panel just described, which is how to cut through the noise, how to make your message more relevant, is really, I think, an unfair association. All right? There seems to be a conflation of issues here that goes back in time to statements made by luminaries, by really smart people in this space. I don't pick on Jeff Zucker, who at the time he said this, he was the head of NBC Universal, but he said something that has lingered for quite a while. In 2008, he warned the entire media industry that we should not end up trading analog dollars for digital pennies. This was at the time and remains one of the most powerful media brokers in our space, and he made this statement that has resonated now, I think, for a decade. He was warning and making sure that everyone was aware that there was more involved in this move away from a model that we understood to a model that actually had new requirements to be successful. This promise or the physical costs that were accepted as permanent inside of the analog world really allowed us to manage media to a scarcity-driven business model, and it really worked. We were accustomed to it. We got steadied and stayed on it. Things were very predictable in that model, very linear. However, today, the world that we live in has been replaced with new cost of sales, and the new cost of sales is dependent on paying for technology that really responds to a scale-based world, a ubiquitous world where content is almost everywhere, and users still remain a finite asset, a finite resource we look for. And yet still the promise of automation offered, especially as we move towards programmatic, is that we promised it would be more efficient and more effective. And yet still ad tech companies have recently come under fire for the lack of transparency as to how we charge and get paid for the technology offered to cut through the noise. I wonder if this conversation boils down to an understanding of the value associated with all of the players that need to be involved in how an advertiser spend goes from $1 amount to the publisher's revenue. I wonder if we don't need to just have more of that conversation happening. Because if this is a requirement, then it isn't truly a tax. It is simply the new cost of sales and should be appreciated as such.